Hello, my friends. Last night, the Russians showed that the energy ceasefire has come to an end. As a result, at the time this video was being made, Kyiv and Dnipro were hit by ballistic missiles. Shelling was also recorded in Kharkiv and many other cities. Because of this, the electricity situation is expected to become even more complicated. At the same time, preparations for negotiations are ongoing. President Zelenskyy held a meeting with the negotiation team and said that the war must be brought to an end. The war must be ended. Zelenskyy held a meeting with the negotiation team ahead of a new round of trilateral talks. Nearly everyone who will take part in the negotiations attended the meeting. According to the president, Kyiv is ready for real steps and believes it is possible to achieve lasting peace. A document on security guarantees with the United States has also been prepared, and work on recovery and economic development agreements is expected. The escalation measures that effectively began last Friday night are helping to build public trust in the negotiation process and in a possible outcome. The war must be ended, he emphasized. What specific real steps are being discussed is still unclear, as Russia wants to gain full control of the Donetsk region. If Ukraine is ready to withdraw its troops, then there may be real results in the negotiations. If not, major changes are most likely not be expected. Trump also said that good news may appear soon, possibly after talks. I think we are doing very well with Ukraine and Russia. This is the first time I'm saying this. I think we may have some good news soon. The US president once again mentioned the thousands of people killed and the senselessness of the war. And now let's move on to the situation along the front line. We'll start with the Sumy direction. For now, the Russians are not carrying out new assaults here, and shelling continues. Meanwhile, in the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are continuing their shelling. Yesterday, there were reports of a strike on a market, and later information emerged about an impact in the city center. There were also new strikes overnight. As we can see, Kharkiv is being hit both during the day and at night. However, along the front line, no new assaults have been recorded so far. The loss of the village of Zelene has also not been confirmed by the Ukrainian side. In the Vovchansk area, activity remains very high. The Russians are assaulting Staritsa, Gravske, Vilcha, the outskirts of Vovchansk, and Vovchansky Hutory. However, despite the high level of activity, the front line is still being held, and no changes have been recorded so far. No new breakthroughs have been reported over the past 24 hours. Along the border, in the area of the village of Krugle, the Russians are not carrying out any new attacks, and the situation has stabilized. In the Veliki Burluk area, the Russians have halted all attacks, and the front line here remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are pushing toward Kupiansk and assaulting Peshane and Kuralivka. At the same time, it's again reported that the Russians are advancing toward Kupiansk Vuzlovy only to plant their flags. In the Borova direction, the Russians are once again assaulting Boguslavka and Novosergiyevka, but they have not been able to advance further, and no changes have been recorded over the past 24 hours. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are assaulting Drobosheva and pushing past the village of Seredny. However, activity has decreased again, and after the Ukrainian forces destroyed Russian positions near Lyman, they haven't advanced further toward the town, and the situation has stabilized. In the Sloviansk direction, the Russians are assaulting Dibrova, advancing past Dronivka and Svyatopokrovsk, and moving across the fields toward the Rai-Alexandrivka area. The situation remains difficult and fighting continues, but so far the Russians haven't been able to consolidate on new positions. In the Kramatorsk direction, the Russians are trying to break through to Privilla, but over the past 24 hours, they haven't achieved any success. Ukrainian forces report that Russian activity in this area is indeed increasing. Amid all the movements in the Kostiantynivka and Siversk directions, the Russians sharply increased activity at the junction of the Chasiv Yar and Siversk directions along the road to Bakhmut, Menkivka and Previlla. So far, nothing new, only infantry assaults and advances in small groups. However, I wouldn't be surprised if columns of armored vehicles suddenly appear, attempting to push along the road. Especially here, the distance to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk is the shortest, about 16 kilometers. As can be seen, Russian activity continues across all directions. In the Kostiantynivka direction, the Russians are assaulting the outskirts of the city, Stepanivka, and advancing past Ivano-Pilya and Plashiivka. Ukrainian forces report that the situation here is also difficult. Near Kostiantynivka, the situation is worsening. The Russians have advanced in the area of the Klebenbyk reservoir. Small Russian groups are present in the southern and southwestern outskirts, including in the city itself. The Russians are trying to move west in the Stupachka area with minor successes. There is advancement near Pretechene, including the village itself, and also in the Plashiivka-Ivanopilya area. Attempts are being made to break into Stepanivka with minor gains. Kostiantynivka itself continues to be methodically targeted with cub bombs, drones, and artillery of various calibers. As we can see, the situation is worsening each day. Of course, Russian gains are minimal and there have been no breakthroughs along the front line. However, holding the defense is becoming increasingly difficult. In the Dobropillia direction, the Russians are assaulting Sofiivka, Vilne, Dorozhny, Bilitska, and Suvorove. Activity here remains almost constant. The Russians are trying to break through the defenses and advance toward Dobropillia. However, over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are assaulting Rodinsk and pushing toward the village of Hrishane across the fields. Attacks are also being recorded in the areas of Marnograd, Pokrovsk, and along the western flank. Meanwhile, Russian forces have long been entrenched near Udachne, and footage has appeared showing Ukrainian aviation destroying them there. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians continue attacking the town and are assaulting Filia, but over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes. In the direction of the settlement of Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians are pushing through the areas of Verbove and Vishneve. Activity here is minimal and there have been no major changes either. In the Huliaipole direction, our activity is much higher. And unfortunately, the front is gradually moving against us. The Russians are advancing past Varvarivka toward the areas of Zelene and Svetopetrivka, assaulting Staroukrainka and Zaliznichne, and the outskirts of Huliaipole. Yesterday, the Russians claimed to have captured the village of Pridorozhhye and showed videos with flags in the village. Looking at the geolocation map, this territory has already been marked as a red zone. However, the Ukrainian side hasn't yet confirmed the loss of the village. Similarly, Ternuvate and Kozivetske are already in the red zone. For now, the situation remains uncertain. Looking at the overall situation across the Zaporizhzhia direction, it's clear that the Russians are advancing along two defensive lines, and the entire movement is aimed toward Zaporizhzhia, which is about 60 kilometers away from one side, so a significant distance. On the other hand, there are few settlements along their path, and all major defensive lines remain on the sidelines. Essentially, they are entering operational areas which must be monitored and controlled using manpower and FPV drones. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts about this in the comments. In the Zaporizhzhia direction today, the Russians are only assaulting Primorsk, and there have been no new breakthroughs. The front line remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, the Russians continue shelling. At the same time, reports indicate that China has played a significant role in helping Russia increase missile production. China helped Russia triple the output of Iskander missiles. CSIS analysts note that China has become a key supplier of critical important components for the Russian defense industry. This includes chemical, equipment, and dual-use goods. This has allowed Russia to significantly accelerate the production of missile weaponry. According to CSIS, in 2024, trade between Russia and China reached $250 billion. For comparison, in 2022, it was $190 billion. China's share in Russia's foreign trade has risen to 33.8%, whereas in 2014 it was only 11.3%. So clearly, China is an active player in this war. Friends, be sure to share your thoughts on this in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.